The unsurpassed, profound, and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in billions of eons. I now see it, hear it, receive it, and uphold it. I vow to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning, to liberate all beings. Let's generate the supreme bodhicitta.
Shigbo tagla, wanchin shigbo tagla, ngoga tang, lokshut jan namla, temba sok mafshago, ransim zoro ne shang, janshi ki tarwar zikchi de nirur shago, rangar chung sang ne jan lor mafshago, zeku nemer man jeki, tsatashi ne songjok mafshago. Tela tsutum jim sanyin dite shadna chumna tarwi lamdog juri tsawa yimbe para timo cha yisharte rjun de la tenne tangen zan tamchat tang dunghu jomber shipi shirub shung gerlong tag tsutum yang tag par zoni nyambar mafshago nyambar mafshago tsutum yang tag ba tang damba gewi churnam jongren girki tsutum yang tag ba tang Mardam bena givi yondan tamchit nam stever manjero dina tsutum no derge yondan tamchit jirtin yambar shibar shago gerlong ta tsutum la nene wombo ngir gob damden dopi yondan ngala yambar mafsharte khwerna shigzi yeka togde shignam fchongne janji lotok dagda marjik ba vlagda marjik ba jeno wombo ngir go mabdam na Ndoyon ringara yangwa tsamda mazit mumta me pirnis zongren girwa zongda me perngirde khwerna chapki mavzon ver targol la chipte yangsir tonwa jind ngiro yang perna chakkin gi nope no tsend tsamda dungr war ngirkyo wombo ringi chakkin gi na tserp mambo war ta nopa chimbe lagbar ngirwe magzapar mafshago Dinam kebar namgi chakkin la zappa vjind gongbo nam chakgir yangda manjik bar yang tagbar chongr shago. Karter janda yangna mrang var ti niba nam tongr ngiro.
Today, let us continue with the teaching on the Sutra on the Buddha's bequeathed teachings. Previously, we've already learned at the time, actually right before the time of Buddha's nirvana, he left the precious teachings on the essentials of the Dharma. He talked about how the monastics and genuine practitioners should engage in practice and what kinds of actions they should abandon. In fact, it still applies to us. All of those teachings still apply to us. A monastic, for example, should not engage in trading, business, nor real estate, nor having pets, nor keeping many attendants, nor servants. For lots of the beginners, lots of the monastics who just got ordained, I think you should definitely contemplate upon all of those teachings and practice accordingly to what the Buddha had taught. In the future, when we have an opportunity to propagate the Dharma to everywhere in this world, we should not only limit our teachings into, for example, the monastic Vinaya. Other than some of the sadhanas or Vinaya teachings, I think the majority of the content upon the Vinaya aspect towards the monastic should be studied within only the monastic Sangha. However, there are content where the content should be shared with not limited to the monastics, rather to a much wider community, the lay practitioner communities, and so on. The teachings given in this Bequeathed Sutra, in fact, can be studied by monastic as well as lay practitioners as well. The lay practitioners should be aware of those teachings that's given by the Buddha. You should be able to understand when the Buddha was alive, what are the Vinayas, the precepts that's required by the Buddha himself. As a practitioner, maybe you have some of those favorable conditions, and then you can follow and abide those teachings. That would be wonderful. But if you really couldn't, at least you shouldn't engage yourself into all kinds of worldly affairs and squander your life. In that way, your whole practice will not be successful at all. Of course, there are people, in order to survive in this world or to bring bread to the table to the family members and so on, they have to engage in all kinds of worldly samsaric things. Those are very practical as well. However, the Buddha said that we should not use all of those effort onto, for example, agriculture, construction, and so on and so forth. We should keep a balance. We can practice at the same time as working with the chores and working with all kinds of events and affairs in our life. We can do that as well. As a monastic, on the other hand, we shouldn't just think about how to propagate the teachings only within the Buddhist circle. Otherwise, we in fact don't have that many monastics. And if you can't find monastics in the later part, in the later times, then you don't really have anyone to propagate the teachings anymore. In fact, we need to know. We need to be more open and inclusive. We need to learn how to propagate Dharma in such a way. There are monastics who tend to be rather quite narrow-minded, and they only give teachings to the monastics and give teachings in terms of Vinaya. Once they encounter lay practitioner communities, they feel that they're so distracted and so confused and have so much afflictions, and then they lose the kind of courage to make connection with them. In fact, this kind of lack of courage and lack of motivation to propagate Dharma to them is in contrary to the Mahayana teachings. We can think about how many lay practitioners are there in this world. For example, in Chengdu, there are about 16 million people over there. And in Beijing, in the city of Beijing, there are about 21 million. Out of those dozens of millions of people, how many of them are monastics? I dare to say there are 1,000, maybe 100 maximum. In fact, we should be aware that the teachings in Buddhism is not only limited to the monastics. Last year, when I was reading into the Ratnakuta Sutra, where it talks about the teachings specifically just for the lay practitioners, and some of the teachings are particularly for the monastics. As there are the teachings that's just specifically focused to give to the lay practitioners, and those are very practical as well. This is something that we need to all contemplate. In fact, we should propagate the teachings to not only limit it to the monastics, rather to the lay practitioners as well. Some people may feel, well, but over here, look at the sutra. The Buddha addressed everyone by saying that bhikshus, bhikshus. So this teaching is mainly towards the bhikshus, isn't it? Well, that is not. We shouldn't think in such a way, because for example, in the Analects composed by Confucius, he had over 1,000 disciples back then, and out of which 72 of them were very famous, such as Chenzi and Yanhui and so on. If he were to say that, oh, this one addressed to Yanhui, therefore it's just to him and not to Chenzi, and it's definitely not related to me, especially after all the 72 disciples are no longer alive in this world, what does his teachings have to do with me then? As you can see, there is a fallacy in this argument. It is not the appropriate way of taking any of the teachings and knowledge. Therefore, sometimes the sages would call the bhikshus or bodhisattvas and then address them and then give teachings. However, the teachings are wide. The teachings can be used for all sentient beings, by all sentient beings. There are teachings, for example, given by Padmasambhava, where his teachings addressed to Yeshe Tsogyo. Atisha, Venerable Atisha, in fact, gave lots of teachings to Juntunpa at the time. Similarly, in Chinese Buddhism, lots of the Zen masters, for example, according to the Sutra of the Sixth Patriarch, where it constantly says that the virtuous ones, in fact, all the virtuous teachers and virtuous disciples, those people definitely are no longer in this world anymore. But all of those teachings that's written, all of those records, are not specifically just limited to that small number of people who were receiving those teachings at the time. In fact, not just Buddhism. In other religions, it is exactly the same as well. In their teachings and in their main text, there are teachers also would give teachings to certain disciples or address them. However, we should understand that there are lots of profound meanings underneath such a kind of a short teachings, that the concise teachings given over here by the Buddha. This time I didn't really flip through too many resources. I didn't really have time, and I don't think it's necessary that way either, because there are so many different commentaries in Chinese language, especially Master Oyi and Master and Vasubandhu's explanations are very similar. After reading, I think Master Oyi must have read the commentary composed by Vasubandhu. In fact, in Vasubandhu's commentary, there are different outlines where it states clearly to say that what this particular teaching is for, what kind of antidote it is. I really want to try to give more teachings in this year. Therefore, I'm not going to give you teachings in too much of a detail. However, I would like to ask all of you who are here, you should contemplate that after studying this sutra, if I were to ask you to give these teachings to the others, would you be able to do that? Would you have any questions or problems? You should ask yourself like this every day. For example, in the later time, if you were to go to certain Buddhist institute or go to certain Sangha or lay practitioners' communities, and if they were to request you to give teachings on this sutra, would you be able to give them? Would you be able to solve their problems? This is the kind of basic mentality that you should uphold when you're listening to this teaching. Now let's continue with studying the sutra. Over here it says that regulate yourselves by eating at the appropriate time and by living in purity. In fact, over here what it means by regulate yourself by eating at appropriate time is a great means to regulate yourself, your physical body, to regulate your desire. And you should eat at the appropriate time. This is really important. Otherwise, our desire may run wild. And if we don't eat at the appropriate time, if we don't eat in an appropriate portion, then our body could naturally create lots of physical problems and illness. Well, I think we've talked about it before, including, I think the problems of the modern people, especially the young people nowadays, they don't eat at the appropriate time and they don't eat a good amount of meal. The young people, they don't usually eat breakfast. They would have some cookies and the milk, and then for lunch they don't really eat well because they would eat in haste. And then in the evening they would eat a big meal. They would overeat. If they were to live in such a way, day after day, this would definitely cause lots of problems to their physical body. Why did the Buddha require the Sangha to only eat one meal a day or not eating after or post noontime? It is on one hand part of the precepts or Vinaya that is created by the Buddha or required by the Buddha. On the other hand, in fact, this rule was made to keep the Sangha healthy. That is why there are people nowadays who would only eat one meal a day or no longer eat post noontime in order to gain the best condition of health. And there are people who would rather do that to lose weight. That's a method, they feel. According to Bodhisattva Charavatara, where it says that whatever I eat can be of the energy that I can provide to the physical body. At the same time, make the same aspiration, may I please be reborn in a pure place for lifetimes. Over here, by living in purity, it means that whatever you eat or whatever you wear, whatever you do in life, it should be appropriate and it should be in accordance with the Dharma. Do not live a life that should be supported by wrong conducts such as killing and stealing and lying and so on and so forth. Even if you can gain a good life through those kinds of wrong methods, then your life is still meaningless. Therefore, we should try our best to live a pure life. The next one says that you should not participate in worldly affairs or act as an envoy. Whatever you do every day, you should not engage in all kinds of worldly affairs such as politics and military and economics, all of those things. In fact, all of those kinds of worldly affairs would definitely influence your motivation to engage in practice. Therefore, as a genuine practitioner, if you were to engage in the 8 worldly means, the 8 worldly affairs, it is not appropriate. The great masters of the past stated that if you were to engage in worldly affairs, if we were to engage in worldly affairs, we can get even more successful than the worldly beings. because we can, in fact, get along with the others much better than the worldly beings. However, all of those kind of gains would be of no meaning, would be of no intrinsic meaning at all. Therefore, we do not get engaged in the worldly affairs at all. And then next one, act as an envoy. It means that between countries and tribes and your side and the other side, and between the monastics and lay practitioners, there is really no intrinsic meaning to pass on messages between one another instead of engage in practice. There are people who act as envoys of passing down different messages and sow discords within one another. In terms of sowing discord of the speech, there are the more obvious speech of discord, and there are the kind of speech that's more subtle and hidden. There are people who really enjoy sowing discords between one another. But as a genuine practitioner, you should engage in your own practice rather than talking about the faults of the others. Otherwise, if you were to get into all of these kinds of faults and shortcomings of the others, you will get fettered by all of those kinds of sufferings and afflictions as well. Therefore, a true practitioner would not engage in any of those at all. In terms of your speech and your action, you should guard it with your right mindfulness at all times. Otherwise, it could lead to great regret later on. Sometimes we see some of our Vajra Sangha, the lay practitioners, the monastics, it feels that they should be quite pure. But behind others' backs, there are people who do not engage in practice all the time. Rather, they try to sow discord within this whole Sangha, and they would stir up lots of issues and problems within the Sangha. So, they're the ones who tend to only pay lip service but don't walk the walk. Our mind, in fact, within our heart, you could harbor a hidden Mara, and there are people who would engage in various kinds of afflictive actions based on the self-centeredness and their jealousy and arrogance. If you were to carry out your action out of such kind of self-centeredness and all of those afflictions, then the fruition of your action could only lead to suffering of self and the others. We're not sages, we're not the noble ones who do not have any afflictions at all. I understand that we inevitably have some selfishness. However, we should learn from what the previous masters have taught. That is, we should observe our mind with right mindfulness at all times. And once you notice that your mind is improper and your actions improper, you should engage in confession and apply the antidote right away. This is crucial. The next one says that nor should you become involved with magical spells and elixirs of immortality. In terms of the incantations, we know how Milarepa also practiced some of those in order to place harm to the relatives who hurted him. And in terms of the exiliars, maybe when Kumarjiva was translating this particular sutra, the Taoism atmosphere was quite popular at that time. They would practice various ways and make the exiliars nectars of immortality in order to achieve this immortality and deathlessness, such as the Emperor Qin, whom sent out a group of people to seek for this medicine of deathlessness. And then the 500 boys and girls all went to Japan. That was the story of how the people actually went to live in Japan. There are various ways and folklores about it. In fact, many great men throughout history and the emperors all seek for immortality. That really just showed that their impermanence, they do not understand what impermanence is, otherwise they wouldn't have done that. In terms of incantation, there are the ones who want to tame the other person, subdue the other person, subjugating, to practice subjugating with some incantations, some magic spells. And there are people who seek for all kinds of medicines, especially I think there are medicines that are targeted towards the seniors and saying that, oh, this is the auxiliary of immortality. It would be really good for your health. And all of those pharmaceutical companies also engage in various kinds of researches. They completely understand what the seniors would enjoy and what their fear is and what they are afraid of the most, so that they can sell their product the best. Not only the worldly people, in fact, some of the monastics or some of the Buddhists, they would also use their different kinds of propagations to say that, oh, I have some nectar pills and those are really good. I'm not sure how the nectar pill of 1995 was so famous. I don't think we had so many of the 1995 nectar pills that was blessed by Pongso Rinpoche. In fact, there weren't that much. But nowadays, it seems that there are so many. But I do have a few real ones. Well, I don't want to talk too much about the nectar pills, so let's not talk about that anymore. Let's look at the sutra then. In the next part of the sutra, it talks about with making connections with high-ranking people. For example, we shouldn't flatter the ones who are of higher ranking or who are more superior than you. At the same time, we should not show a sense of condescension towards the lowly ones. Condescension, for example, if we were to look down at the others, if we were to look down at the ones who have a lowly social status or have those kind of lowly social status as well as work in the society, such as butchers and prostitutes and so on. If you were to place a sense of condescending towards them and be more affectionate towards the higher ones or higher ranking people, those are not the practice of a practitioner. That being said, you should not associate too much with the ones who have low morality at the same time as well. And then the Buddha started talking about what a genuine practitioner should do. Over here, he said that with an upright mind and a proper mindfulness, you should seek to cross over. So your mind should be pure, and it would be the best for you to recognize the nature of your mind. And even if you couldn't, at least your mind should not be fettered by afflictions of the three poisons. one should try to cross over oneself as well as the others with right mindfulness. And cross over over here meaning liberating or free self and others from suffering and afflictions. Therefore, we should observe our own mind. And if your mind is just like the weather in spring that changes ever constantly, very quickly you will get very happy all of a sudden, and any little things could make you become extremely painful. There are people who changes so quickly, and the reasons for their changes of mood, such kind of mood swing, is rather very simple and even can be considered as menial. The mind of mundane beings indeed is quite scary from time to time, because we can see that the beings are suffering a lot. Let it be ourselves or the others. Whenever we see the sentient beings are suffering or going through great pain, we should not laugh at the others or take delights of the other's pain. Rather, we should feel as if we are also having this kind of pain and suffering. We should generate such kind of empathy and compassion. In fact, I don't think any of us can say that I have never suffered a bit. Why are those people suffering from this? In fact, as mundane beings, we're all being troubled by many afflictions, especially the ones who never practiced. And some, even though practice for a long period of time, but if their mind is not infused with Dharma, if Dharma has not completely merged into their mind, have not tamed their mind, even after 20, 30, 40 years of practicing and studying the Dharma, without the genuine appliance of the Dharma, without the genuine practice and engaging into the Dharma, then Dharma is Dharma and mind is mind. It doesn't really, there are two different entities and there is no change whatsoever in your mind. Just like if a patient, though taken the right prescription, though have already received the right prescription but have not taken any of the medicines that's been prescribed, then how could that medicine be of benefit to the patient? Therefore, we can see that the sentient beings definitely need to use the practice to tame the afflictions within. And practice is indeed not that easy. For example, you have to engage in chanting, meditation, and reading and studying. There are people who tend to be more efficient and some are not. And those are all related to your previous habitual patterns, as well as the causes and conditions of this lifetime as well. The next one, the Buddha said that one shall not conceive one's faults. There are people who, out of various reasons, they would like to conceal their faults. According to the Tibetan saying, we say that even if a person has a gigantic yak running on his own face, he does not see it. But if another person has a flaw as small as a tick, that person can see it clearly. And there are people like that definitely around us. There are people who talks about this is wrong, the other one is wrong, and talks and keep blaming on the others about the shortcomings of the others or their mistakes and so on and so forth. There are people like that. And there are the ones who also put on a special appearance to delude the multitudes. In order to deceive the others, there are people who would pretend that they have some kinds of miraculous powers, some kind of special penetrations, and who have some divine eye. Without them they in fact do not have any of those divine eyes at all. They cannot see those things at all, but they would claim that I can see it. I can see you definitely would have an obstacle coming up in your life. Why don't you open up your mouth? Let me see your tongue. I will be able to tell. This is really a Chinese traditional medicine's way of diagnose any illness. But Chinese medicine is not to dilute beings. Chinese medicine definitely have some pith instructions. Similarly, the Tibetan medicine also have some pith instructions or some special ways of curing the illness. But there are people who would put up a special appearance to dilute the multitude of beings. This is not allowed either. Know your limits and be content with the 4 kinds of offerings. The 4 kinds of offerings such as food, clothing, bedding, as well as nutrition or medicine. Those are the 4 types of offerings. Whenever one receives such kind of offerings, one should be content with whatever amount that is offered, and then receive or accept such kind of offering that is appropriate to the amount that is needed. So you have to have a limit and be content with the 4 types of offerings. According to Mahaprajna Paramita Shastra, where it says that, such as a cow and a calf, if the herder do not take all the milk out of the cow and leave some milk to the calf, in this way, that would be appropriate. Similarly, if a practitioner, once receiving the offerings, the practitioner should not try to ask the benefactor to offer all of his or her wealth. You should ask them to also save some for themselves. At the same time, ask them to make some as an offering so that they will be able to generate more merit. In this way, it will be beneficial to both sides. In fact, when it comes to dealing with worldly affairs, it is the same thing as well. There are people who would receive or accept the offerings without any limitation. This is really inappropriate. To me, personally, whenever you make offering to me, I can't really do much about those offerings. However, as benefactors, whatever offerings that you make, in fact, they are difficult to gain. There are people who, out of the heat of the moment, and would make the offering of all of his or her savings and then ended up being completely broke. That is quite a pity. Whenever there are situations like such, as a person receiving the offering, we should know the limitation and we should be content with the amount that is needed, but not to require the benefactors to make offering of all of those. At the same time, after receiving the offering, a genuine practitioner should not accumulate such kind of wealth. Otherwise, at the time of death, there would be difficulties of taking care of such kind of wealth, and it would create further troubles. There was once a monastic who received many offerings from many benefactors, but that monastic did not accumulate enough merit nor wisdom, and he did not give to the others with generosity, and he did not have the ability to enjoy all of the offerings that he accepted. So after his death, he became a mountain of camel, and he lasted and as wide as 10 miles, or as long as 10 miles. That mountain of camel that mountain's all made of flesh, so he became a mountain of flesh. And then all the people over there around that area, including the people that's bordering that area, because of the famine that's going on over there, they all went to this mountain and started farming the meat out of the flesh out of the mountain, and then they were eating his meat. In fact, especially now, because of the turbulence of all the geopolitical situation or the economical situations, I really encourage all the benefactors, all the lay practitioners, whomsoever makes the offering to the three jewels, to be aware of your financial situation and save some for yourself as well, because I think the three jewels won't starve to death. Let it be the great masters or the three jewels, the place of refuge, they're safe, they're fine. In fact, I think the worldly beings still need many, they still need to save up so that they can provide certain securities for themselves. Therefore, we all have to know our limitations. Previously, in fact, the Buddha talks about the limitations and the exemptions of observing precepts. And then later on, the Buddha started giving the teachings up on the Vinaya, the precepts. In fact, in terms of precepts, there are certain precepts over here that's talked just towards the monastics, and some of those precepts can be observed by lay practitioners as well. The merit of precepts is the merit of observing precept is great. Over here, the precept's name is Pratimoksha. Pratimoksha can be related to Shila Paramita, or the paramita of observing precepts. In fact, many of the commentaries do not specifically explain what pratimoksha is, but what it means is the root of freedom, or the source of freedom. Over here, it says that by relying on these precepts, you will give rise to all dhyana concentrations and reach the wisdom of cessation of suffering. Whenever you have precepts, if you observe the precepts, you will be able to then give rise to all the dhyana concentrations. Without such kind of ground of precept, you will not be able to develop the dhyana concentration, the meditative absorption. And without the meditative absorption, then you will not be able to generate wisdom that is the source of the cessation of suffering. So they are closely correlated to one another. For a person whose precepts or his observation of precept is not pure, then the power of liberating sentient beings and the bodhi towards the Mahayana and Theravada tradition would not be easy. On the other hand, it is vice versa. For the ones who observe the pure precepts, they will generate a great wisdom, and they will be able to benefit the sentient beings with great power. Also, will be able to attain the bodhi of both Mahayana and the Hinayana. So, observing the precepts is really the root of everything. We should be very clear of that. Many people would feel that precepts or vows, observing such kind of precepts are really just a way for, is really just a rule for the Buddhists, but that is not true. In fact, over here, precept is a totrum. It means regulation. It means rules. In fact, in any kinds of groups or communities, we often talk about rules and regulations. For example, if you're a teacher, you need to follow the regulations as a teacher. If you want to be a functionary or civil servants in the government, there are the rules and regulations you need to follow as a civil servant. If you want to work, for example, even if you're a pilot, there are rules to follow as a pilot. Therefore, we know that rules or precepts, in fact, are the kind of regulations that everyone has to uphold in this world. In terms of the precepts that's taught over here by the Buddha are the kind of rules or regulations that's made by the Buddha. For example, in fact, for the four assemblies, all the disciples, they take such kind of vow and precepts to be not only a good person in this lifetime, but also in order to attain the fruition for next lifetimes and to obtain such kind of transcendent fruitions. Without such kind of regulation and precepts, the world, the society would be a complete chaos. And just imagine a society where people could kill the others randomly and you can steal from the others without any concern or break others' family and lie to the others. In fact, these are definitely not a happy place to be. So the teachings that's taught by the Buddha, they are of great profundity, especially if you were to spend a lot of time to contemplate upon that. We're not even talking about the profound teachings taught by the Buddha, such as seeing the true nature and the spontaneity and spontaneous purity and all of those. We're not even talking about that, but we're talking about something as simple as observing precepts and following the rules. There are, in fact, lots of wisdom within that cannot be surpassed by mundane beings. So let's look at those. Over here it says that for this reason, bhikshus, you should uphold the pure precepts and not allow them to be broken. If a person is able to uphold the pure precepts, he will, as a result, be able to have good dharmas. If one lacks the pure precepts, no good merit and virtues can arise. It is said in the compilation of the essentials of all the dharmas, where it says that if people do not observe any precepts, if there is no such observation of such kind of precepts, then there is no beginning, middle, and the fruition of the virtue. There will be no great benefit to everyone, and there is definitely no nirvana, the ultimate peace. Why do we pay such respect to the monastic? For the first and foremost reason is because the Vinaya is very different for the monastics than the lay practitioners. If a person do not uphold Vinaya properly, then they cannot even stay within the Sangha of monastics. Just like how the worldly beings, if they were to break rules, then people around them would not respect them at all either. So the roots of merit is really observing precepts. Master Lianqi, within his commentary, he stated that all of the precepts that's stated above, they are mainly taught towards the beginner bodhisattvas. Looking at all the great masters throughout history, some of the masters whom in fact owned lots of lands, some did do farming, engage in farming and plowing the land. Some did engage in herding the animals, and some did use different instruments and listening to the sound of bell, and they still, and some indeed became the ministers of great kings. They were not specifically being bound by the precepts that's stated over here. Rather, they used all kinds of miraculous penetrations and actions to benefit beings in various ways. Therefore, over here, all of the precepts and regulations taught over here are mainly towards the beginner bhikshus. Therefore, after finishing studying this sutra, if there are people were to see the monastics, for example, selling things or plowing fields inside a center, if you were to say that, oh, look, the last Bequeathed Sutra didn't say that you can do this, this is terrible, and you must be a terrible monastic. In fact, to the great bodhisattvas, if they can benefit sentient beings, and then they can engage in all kinds of actions such as selling, trading, and all of those. Not only those actions do not tint their pure precepts, in fact, that's what their precepts require them to practice. Because within the vow of bodhisattvas, there are three types of vows. There's the vow of abandoning the vicious actions, the vow of upholding all virtuous dharma, and then the vow of benefiting all sentient beings, and out of which benefiting sentient beings, this vow is this particular vow gives great exceptions to the kind of beings who have already eradicated great all those coarse defilements in their mind stream. So there are exceptions to this type of people who are pure. And according to Avatamsaka Sutra, it says that the precepts is the root of the Supreme Bodhi. Therefore, one should hold such kind of pure precepts. And if they can uphold such kind of pure precepts, one is being praised by all the Tathagatas. And in the Shastra of praising the precepts, where it says that if a person were to have such pure precept, even if they have not even gained 1% of the merit of engaging in contemplation and studying, this person will still be able to be reborn in Pure Land, because other than Pure Land, there's nowhere for them to go. And then the Buddha said that, therefore, you should know that the precepts are dwelling place for the foremost and secure merit and virtue. All of you, bhikshu, if you're already able to abide by the precept, you should restrain the five sense organs and do not allow them to enter the five desires as they please. The five desires or five sense organs over here, the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and all of and the body. So all of those five sense organs should be observed with the right mindfulness. Just as Confucius also taught that the inappropriate form one should not look at. The inappropriate sound is not to be heard. So your five sense organs should not be distracted into the exterior phenomena, because that would create great downfalls as a practitioner. The true practitioners would be able to control their own sense organs and control the gates of their sense organs. There are many peace instructions and methods taught in Buddhism. However, everyone's habitual patterns of afflictions are very different. Not everyone could practice everything perfectly. But usually people get ordained, and after studying Dharma, they would definitely take up a big change in their life. For example, there are people who tend to engage in alcoholism or smokes a lot or enter into all kinds of inappropriate places and squandering their life in quite vicious and impure environments. But after they engaged in studying the Dharma, their life started becoming much more pure and much more regulated. Their mind is much more pure, and they will be able to observe their sense organs. There are lots of differences, not only talking about the monastics and practitioners, even people who are working simply over here, they are getting quite influenced by the practitioners. Because as human beings, it's very easy for us to get influenced by the others. For example, if you're in a pure Dharma practice center, it is difficult to carry out your frivolous actions. However, in the other places that is not a Dharma practice center, in fact, there are many of the samsaric entertainment places that's specifically set up to distract the sentient beings. So there are many opportunities for people to practice the inappropriate actions. Therefore, over here, the Buddha said that in order to observe the pure precept, the five organs should not be distracted into the five desires as they please. And then the Buddha started talking about a few different metaphors. So the first one is that it is like a person tending cattle who carries a staff, such as maybe a whip or a stick, while watching the cattle. Let it be cattle or sheep. By doing so, this person do not allow those animals to run loose and trample others' sprouting grains. If you let your five sense organs run loose, not only will the five desires become boundless, because over here the herder has to be very careful with the cattle or whatever animals that they watch them. If the cattle and sheep were to run loose, then they would create a big trouble, not only to the animals but to the herder. So the herder has to be very careful and be very watchful. In fact, it corresponds to that if you let your five sense organs run loose, not only will the five desires become boundless, they will be uncontrollable. The five sense organs, once run loose, they will become boundless. Because of the five desires, is uncontrollable. The young people nowadays, because the young people nowadays, they are the ones who started off having right mindfulness. Including some of the students I've sponsored in the past, I noticed that when they went out to attend universities, they were really wonderful young children. And after a few years, though they've changed, but it's not very severe, but after they get into the society, they change completely. Almost changed into a different person. And then at that time, it's very difficult to go back. There are people, there are the two young men I know. There was one of them were attending a Buddhist institute, and the other one went to university, a worldly university. The one who attended the Buddhist Institute became a young couple. And the other one, his action became really terrible. I do have their WeChat, and through their WeChat, sometimes I would peek into what they're doing, and then from comparing to the things that they post in their social media, I notice there are different ways of living their life is completely different. Their value systems are completely different. So even if two people of the same age, because of their past different karma and their present and different conditions, they can have very different results. One can be of great success, and the other one can encounter great failure and even tread on the boundary of being imprisoned. And then the next one is about a violent horse unrestrained by reins who can be very dangerous and even drag a person who's riding on that violent horse and drag him to or cause him to fall into a deep pit. This is the second. The third one is that if the five sense organs were to get unconstrained, and then the five desires could lead you to a dangerous place. Just as if you're robbed or injured, you will suffer for only one single lifetime. But the injury from the plundering done by the five sense organs brings misfortunes which extend for many lifetimes. If a person were to be robbed by the bandits, then they would suffer from poverty for this lifetime, or maybe lose the wealth that they've accumulated. But that kind of suffering would only last for one lifetime. However, if one's five sense organs were to be completely wild, and if one were to be robbed by the five desires, then that could be brought misfortunes that could extend for many lifetimes. Let it be encountering a bandit or riding a violent horse, which could result in losing the body and wealth of this lifetime. But if we do not be careful, if we were to violate the law, and if we were to commit the vice and violate the precepts, then such kind of misdeeds or such kind of negative impact would last for lifetimes. Therefore, we have to be very careful. We have to have the right mindfulness to observe ourselves at all times. And then the Buddha said that for this reason, wise people restrain the five sense organs and do not go along with them. They restrain them like thieves who are not allowed to run loose. We have to practice in such a way and watch our sense organs with the right mindfulness without any carelessness. Otherwise, we will be only suffering from the negative deeds that's conducted in this lifetime. There are people who have terrible character and would practice all the vice and do not follow the rules of cause and conditions. And there is no way that they will be able to conceive all of such kind of vice actions forever. In fact, after only a short period of time, their terrible actions will be extended or even be shown in front of all the worldly beings. But on the other hand, if a person were to practice with the proper actions, then such kind of actions would lead to a wonderful future as well as immeasurable happiness. This sutra is really good. It's a really good sutra to be studied by the beginners. In fact, we're all beginners. Maybe some of you feel that you've already studied for many years, but this is, or even some of you have studied for a whole life. You may not seem like a beginner in terms of your age, but our mind stream is still beginners. Our mind stream still needs these Dharma teachings, just like that's taught, what is taught in the words of my perfect teacher, the preliminary practices. Some people say that, oh, this is only preliminary. I want to study the actual practice. I want to study the best Dharma, the highest Dharma. But our mind stream maybe we don't even have the kind of foundation that is appropriate to practice the preliminary yet. How can we become the vessel, the proper vessel to receive the highest teachings? And what's the meaning of that if you're not ready to do that? Therefore, the Buddha's teaching right around the time before he entered into nirvana is indeed really precious to all of us. These kinds of teachings are so precious, though that we never had the opportunity to see the magnificent body of the Tathagata in this lifetime, but we're still really lucky because we can receive the teaching that is just like the Buddha himself, the last Bequeathed Sutra. So we have already planted the seed of liberation. We should generate a sense of happiness and cheerfulness. Oh, there's no class, maybe someone are thinking. And there are people who would feel that if there's no class, they will feel happy, but that's not good. You should feel happy when there are classes. There are people who, after hearing that there's no classes, they will feel like, oh, maybe I should go to go and have hot pot tomorrow. In fact, I think we should feel the other way around. We should be happy when there are Dharma teachings tomorrow. Okay, so let's stop here.
Zole